Hi, it's Jeremy Shatton from AnEarful, and this video is all about 20 cool and unusual vinyl packages. Before we get to them, however, let's have a little bit of history. For a long time, like 60,000 years, there were no physical objects associated with music other than the instruments that were constantly being invented over that time to create music with. It wasn't until the rise of recording that people got the idea to make music in one place and carry it somewhere else on some kind of a portable object. The first commercially available objects, starting in around 1896, were those wax cylinders you might have seen. It's a cardboard tube with wax built up around it, and then they etched the sound into that. Originally they used metal foil, but the sound was so poor that they pushed themselves and found a different way. The wax cylinders were better than the foil, but not great. Now, wax cylinders were kind of interesting because they were reusable. If you got tired of the song, you could bring it in and have it scraped down or softened up, I'm not exactly sure, and then they would re-etch a different song into it. Because of that, the packaging was generic. They look almost like something you'd see in a pharmacy, just these cardboard boxes with rubber stamped or handwritten labels on them. Cross something out and put the next song on there. There's no packaging to speak of. It wasn't until around 1909 when we had the rise of the disc format. In fact, right about that time, there was an extraordinary full-color package for Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite. That was in 1909, but it really took a long time before packaging became something like what we recognize it as today. Originally, it started out more like books. Packaging of vinyl took a lot from the packaging of books. You would go to the store, buy the record in a plain brown paper sleeve. You'd bring it home and you'd put it in your album, like a photo album, but it was a record album. This is my father's record album from the mid-1930s, before he even came to the United States from Canada. You can see he's got a bunch of records in here. These are 12-inch 78s. A lot of classical music, some Jewish liturgical stuff. He also had a copy of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. I don't know what's become of it. It's no longer in here. Around that same time in the mid-1930s, there were also some extraordinary packages like this one that my father had. Russian Gypsy Melodies. This was released on Victor, and it consisted of 10-inch 78s of Russian Gypsy Melodies, I assume. I've never heard it. But you can also see the quality of this. Sure, there's a little yellowing on the paper, but not bad. It's very stiff and flexible, and the colors on the front. So the quality was there. And as I said, this is packaged more like a book than the way we think about records. My grandmother was also a record collector and had her record album. These are 7-inch 45s, however, dating from the mid-40s to the early 50s. Mostly dance songs. Now we're going to get to the records I wanted to share with you today, when packaging really went crazy. Starting in the 1940s, it's a bit of a Wild West. You could get records in a 7-inch format, and then there was the 10-inch LP, the 12-inch LP. Songs would overlap. There'd be volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume 4 in 7-inch, and then they would put those all on a 10-inch, and then they added a few more songs, and it became a 12-inch. So it's just all over the place. You can find variations on these themes. And one I have is a collection of 4 45s by Nellie Lutcher. Nellie Lutcher was an important figure in the transition from post-war R&B to rock and roll. Little Richard was influenced by her, lots of other people, Fats Domino, and even Aretha Franklin, when she was making some of those Columbia albums, you can hear hints of the Nellie Lutcher style. One of the things she incorporated was singing along with her notes as she sang, diddle-doo, diddle-doo, you know. It was really, really cool. And the songs are great. Fine Brown Frame is just an absolute classic. You can see how nicely packaged this is. These are probably jukebox singles, and they thought, you know what, people seem to like them, we'll put them in a box and sell them as one set, rather than putting them on an album. So you could cut a rug with Real Gone by Nellie Lutcher. This is from 1950. I don't know who the designer is. There's no credits. Probably cost you about $45 if you found one like this. I think I paid $5. That was a long time ago, though. Now, stepping into the 60s, 1962, this is Kenyon Hopkins, a sound tour of Spain. He liked to do these sound tours all around the world. He also did the Sound of New York classic. many wonderful soundtracks, Baby Doll, The Hustler, such good stuff. But the thing I like about this is that it opens up in the center. And because this was the hi-fi era, you get a whole lot of stuff about how it was recorded and how great it's going to sound. And then you get this neat little half-size booklet over here. It's bound in there, stapled to the cover. Just a really nice package. Far from my favorite Kenny and Hopkins record, but you can find one of these nifty little things for about $5. And I recommend having it because I don't have any other packages that look like that. Now we come to the rock revolution. People really were trying to make a splash, and it was cutthroat. The Beatles versus the Rolling Stones, right? So the Beatles put out Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band. And then we got the Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesty's Request. Now they wanted to stand out from what the Beatles had done, partially with the cover, because the cover of Sgt. Pepper's was so iconic immediately. The Peter Blake assemblage that was photographed by Michael Cooper. And Michael Cooper also took the picture that was used in this lenticular image in here. Originally, when they put this out, this was 1967, the lenticular piece went all the way to the edge, but they found that to be too expensive. I've never seen one of those. I have no idea how many of them exist, but you can find one of these probably for about $40 in this good condition. They made it for a while. This is from 1967, though. This is an original. Now, some might say that they came up with this elaborate packaging, especially for the time, to cover up for the deficiencies of the music. There are so many good songs on here. Don't listen to those people. Citadel is top 10 Stones for me. Such a great record. It's a fun record. Ironically enough, it took the Beatles 40 years to answer the lenticular challenge with this reissue of Sgt. Pepper's, which comes with a lenticular version of the cover on the outer sleeve. There's no vinyl in here, however. This is all CDs. It's a great set to have, though. Moving into the 70s, we get Led Zeppelin. Now, Jimmy Page was a very ambitious person. Still is, but he does things differently these days. In any case, he felt the packaging had to be special. So they went from a single sleeve for Led Zeppelin 1, a gatefold for Led Zeppelin 2. For Led Zeppelin 3, he wanted to do something really unique. So he hooked up with a designer who went by the name Zacron. Sounds like a space-age fabric, right? Richard Drew was the man's real name. And they came up with this concept for Led Zeppelin 3. There's a wheel inside the front cover, held in place with a rivet. And when you turn it, different pictures appear in the sort of randomly assembled die-cut holes around. Now, because the pressure was so hot on Led Zeppelin to get things out and get them done, satisfy the incredible demand for their music, they didn't quite get the images and the holes and everything to tell the story they really wanted it to tell. But you can still see each of their faces in the bigger hole and all kinds of different shapes and colors. I like to keep it on this setting because you get John Bonham. Rest in peace. The inside is a lot of fun. It's colorful, filled with all these little gewgaws. On the back, you get this very cool portrait of the band. I might say that the cover does not quite reflect the inside, which show them moving into a folkier direction on many songs. A lot of layers of acoustic guitars, beautiful songs like Tangerine, That Is the Way, Ronnie Your Stomp. So do those things quite match up? Maybe not, but still a great album, iconic sleeve. Now, after being one of the greatest songwriters in history in collaboration with David Porter at Stax record label, Isaac Hayes came into his own around 1969 with Hot Buttered Soul as an album artist. He went on a tear, just releasing one great album after another. In 1971, he put out what may be his magnum opus, Black Moses. This was a big statement for him, and he really wanted to have the cover make a statement too. So he hooked up with a designer named David Krieger, who ran a design studio called the Graffiteria. And they had creative director Larry Shaw, and they put together this wild fold-out cover which they assumed many people would want to hang on their walls. So you could have Isaac Hayes himself in your living room as the Black Moses. On the other side, you get him with his iconic chains and sunglasses. Just one of the coolest men who ever lived. Black Moses himself. Because they assumed that you'd want to hang this part on the wall, they provided a full-on inner sleeve that was almost like a regular album cover, with both albums fitting into there. Had the same exact artwork that was on the outside of this one. If you get a copy like this, it could cost you $20, $25. For some reason, it's not that expensive. The same designers worked on Funkadelic's Maggot Brain, in addition to other albums for Isaac Hayes. A few years ago, around 2019, I was in Bologna, Italy, and I went to one of these great outdoor fairs where they just sell everything, and they sold a lot of records there. And I stumbled on this, Richard Caccianti's Mu. This is an RCA Italiana release from 1972, designed by Francesco Logaluso. And to encapsulate Caccianti's concept album about all the pieces of a man, if you will, Logaluso came up with this extraordinary die cut idea where you get not only one die cut cover, not even just two die cut covers, you actually get three. And they form all the layers that lead you to our star child here. It's a very good record too. I would call it progressive folk, orchestral folk. I really like it a lot. Caccianti's still around. If you want to get a copy of this, however, it's going to set you back probably around $70. I paid €10 on the streets of Bologna. Now, in 1973, reggae was coming up. And Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records, wanted to make a real splash with his newest signing, the Wailers. So for the first album, Catch a Fire, he hooked up with a company called Shorewood Packaging. The designers were Bob Weiner and Rod Dyer, and they came up with this beautiful idea for Catch a Fire, which is like a cigarette lighter. Now, these things are notoriously fragile. You can find them with the top part missing. It's held in place by a rivet here. You can see it was at one time sold as a cutout, believe it or not. I got it used. I paid $3.75, and the album itself is in very good condition as well. So I really lucked out. This was sometime in the 80s. If you wanted to get a copy that looked like this, it would probably cost you about $60. But I think it's worth it, because once they determined that this was too expensive, or they sold enough of them to make their point that the Wailers were the big new thing, they changed the cover to just a full cover photo of Bob Marley. Now, you'll note this is the Wailers, not Bob Marley and the Wailers. Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer were equal partners at the beginning. The first two albums were released under the name The Wailers. So I like this copy. If you can find one, grab it. Even if they're disconnected, grab it. Now, the band War made some of the best rocked up funk singles of the 70s. They also made great albums, but I have to say that my favorite record of theirs is the Greatest Hits with the gold on the cover. That was from 1976, absolutely perfect record. But their albums are a lot of fun, and they really tried to make a statement with each of them. And this one is called Deliver the Words from 1973. They worked with an art director named Thomas Warkentin and a designer named Gary Sato, who designed many albums for War, and also Big Bamboo for Cheech and Chong. Now, what he did for this Deliver the Word album, which once again looks a bit like a leather-covered book and even has the texture, is they cut out part of it with this kind of jagged-looking die cut. And you can see the man walking in the sunshine, or the sunset, sunrise, sunset, can't be sure. He also appears at night on the inner sleeve. So if you want to change the mood a little, you can put the sleeve in the other way and it'll look like that. You can see this is split up here. I paid $1 for this. If you wanted one in perfect condition, it would probably cost you $5. It's just a great thing to have. Staying in 1973, we come to the Counts. Counts were a interesting rock and folk band, or rock and funk band, soul, funk, R&B, lots of different things going on. And this album is called Love Sign by the Counts. The cover design is by Overton Lloyd. Based on my research, this may be the earliest cover of his to hit the stores. He did a lot of work for Parliament Funkadelic covers, and also worked all the way up into the hip-hop era doing an album cover for Digital Underground, among others. Now, one thing I like about this album is that it's a gatefold, but it sort of opens from the back, and then you get this cutout that looks like something's bursting through the cover. And you can see here there's a hand reaching out to another hand, sort of shades of the creation, right? And when you open it up, you get this painting of, I guess it's the Garden of Eden, a man and a woman. And yeah, it's very cool. It's a cool record to have. You could probably find one like this for about 12 bucks. Now in 1974, The Who were in high demand. People wanted something new from them. They were waiting for something new. And what they got disappointed many people, I found out later. But when I found it, I was super happy. That was several years later. This was an Odds and Sods collection, literally called Odds and Sods by The Who. I love the helmets. It says R-O-C-K. Now, the design concept for this was by Roger Daltrey himself. And his idea was to have this picture that looked like it had been torn apart and taped back together, and then to have these die-cut slashes in there. And you can see that there's something going on behind them. It's hard to see, but there's a concert photo of the band behind the slashes. Completing the package, however, when you pull out the record, you will find not only a lyric sheet as a full credits and reproduction of the cover, you also get this interesting 1/3 fold poster, which that's the picture that's behind the slashes on the front. So you get to see the whole picture. I thought it was a really nice package. It's filled with great songs like Too Much of Anything, Put the Money Down, Pure and Easy, Faith in Something Bigger, their first single, I'm the Face. It was a real great collection showing all the different things The Who could do and had done over the years. For some reason, this is still not the most well-regarded record. You could find a copy like this for like $8. Now we're going to jump forward to 1979 to the record I named the #1 post-punk album of all time, Public Image Limited's Metal Box. A funny story about this, when I first heard this record, second PIL record, I heard the second edition, which was conventionally packaged like a double album. That was for the US market. But the music just absolutely grabbed me and fit me like a glove from the first note. As soon as I heard those jaw wobble bass notes, I was sold and I needed to have this record. I went down to J&R Music World and I saw this and I was holding it in my hand. It was wrapped in plastic and I was thinking about it. I think it was $25 and I was like, yeesh, that's a little bit steep. It was the end of the school year. I was feeling broke. So I put it back and I went home. Went up to the Adirondacks for the summer, working with a family as their mother's helper. And all summer long, I could not stop thinking about this record. It's just so extraordinary. I also couldn't stop thinking about Funky Kingston by Toots and the Maytals because the dad of the family I was working with kept saying, you got to get this record, you got to get this record. So as soon as I got back to New York, I headed straight down to J&R Music World, hoping against hope that they would have Metal 1, the Metal Box, that they would still have a copy. Now, they only made 60,000 of these and shipped 10,000 of them to the US. So it's a limited edition of a sort. I got there and they still had it, 25 bucks. I had the money because I just worked all summer. I got that, I got Funky Kingston, I went home and I was a happy man. Now, I made a whole video about getting the records out of this tin. It's not really that hard. You kind of work your way around. And one thing I think is cool is that the packaging is so extraordinary in that it's this metal box with their name stamped on the front, but then the rest of it is kind of Spartan, which I think is cool. It's just this sheet of paper gives you the song titles and the timings. And then in between each 12-inch is just a sheet of paper. I've heard some people say it's hard to get the records back in once you get them out, but I never really had a problem with it. And I have to say that this is the way to own the record. Unfortunately, just because these are 12 inches, they're cut at 45 RPM, and the way the bass just emerges, takes over your living room, is absolutely extraordinary. Oh, depending on your taste for patina, you can find this in a variety of conditions. You can see mine has got scuffs and marks on it. But it probably costs you about $150 to $200 to pick up one of these. There are only 60,000 of them after all. The design was by Dennis Morris, fascinating guy who was a photographer, designer, worked with Bob Marley, Burning Spear, Linton Kwesi Johnson, Marianne Faithfull. He was also the singer in Basement 5, who I just named my number 10 post-punk album of all time. Now, Joy Division was a very special band from the first time I heard them. Ian Curtis had just died and I heard their album Closer. We were so devastated at his suicide because even before hearing that record, we had hopes that they would come to America. They had plans and we would get to see them. But that never happened. So in 1981, they put together a package of songs that might have been Joy Division's third album, along with some live material. Once again, had an extraordinary Peter Saville design. And there was a special edition, which was book-bound, like cloth-bound. And they put the double album inside. This is all letterpress. You know, it's embossed. Just very cool. And you can see that my ribbon is no longer one piece. The ribbon is kind of fragile, but I've had this for a long time. I bought it from a friend around that time. For some reason, he was selling all of his stuff, probably for financial reasons, I'm sorry to say. But he needed the money and I needed the record, and we made a deal. It really is a great record too. Hearing their live sound changed my whole impression of the band. Next we get to 1982. Another object of desire that I saw in Venus Records on 8th Street was this little book called Fashions, Bowie Fashions. And this is a little plastic book that consists of picture singles. Each one has a different picture on both sides in these plastic sleeves. I just think it's super cool. Musically, it's frankly negligible. There's only one or two songs on here that aren't everywhere else on the original albums. He was not the kind of guy who put out a ton of great B-side material. But the packaging is awesome. I think it was about $35, which was definitely steep. But man, just look at these great pictures. And it's all color-coded with the thing here and the Bowie signature. I just love it. Now, you got to be careful when you see this listed, on Discogs, for example. You'll notice that sometimes people are just selling one single. I don't know if they all got separated, or they have two singles, or they have the book without any singles. Beware. If you can find it with all the singles like this, and I have no idea who designed this or what art director was behind it, but if you can find it with everything like this, it'll probably set you back around $90. It's a cool object for the Bowie fan, the Bowie collector. I recommend it. 1982 was the great year for post-punk. And I had a really good friend who recommended this to me, the Recommended Records Sampler. Recommended was a label that specialized in UK and European art rock, post-punk, avant-garde. Some of it's like a cross between jazz and classical music. It's really good stuff. You had people like Art Zoid, the Art Bears, Faust, This Heat, the Great Stormy Six. So psyched to discover them. The Black Sheep, Robert Wyatt. And you can see that it's sold in this PVC sleeve that has the album title in glitter on the front. And then you pull out the albums and you get this fold out that's got information on each band. It's got song credits and lyrics on this sheet. One really cool story is that I met a guy named Greg Hill years later, just a few years ago, and he told me that he was an intern for Recommended Records at the time they were working on this in the UK, and he was one of the people who was tasked with putting the glitter on there. Isn't that amazing? They had so many songs, they couldn't fit everything on there. So they also put out this bonus single that had Peter Blegvad and R. Stevie Moore on there, another Faust track. It's one-sided because the other side is etched or painted. It's got this design on it. Cool, right? Now, the recommended record sampler will probably cost you about $33 if you can find a copy like that. Single might cost you about $17. It was designed by Chris Cutler and Maggie Thomas. Coming to the end of our 80s section, we come to the Talking Heads. After Remain in Light, they were on fire. They started getting more commercial success. People were astonished at their musicality. And for their next album, they really wanted to do something special. So they hooked up with Robert Rauschenberg, the artist, and he came up with this package, which is a little bit of a throwback to the Led Zeppelin idea. It's got these wheels. They don't quite match up, though, but they probably were never meant to. You can see that this wheel lines up with the blue, and then there's blue on the back. The record itself, when you open this up, is clear vinyl. So that's kind of cool. Then there's like a little peg there to keep it inside. Now you'll notice that the record is clear vinyl. The case is now highly oxidized. I don't know what kind of plastic they used for this, but it has not maintained its clarity, but that's just fine. Now, I also bought this on cassette at the time because I didn't want to mess with the record too much, but I still had to peel it and look at it. I couldn't leave it in the shrink wrap. If you can find one of these, it's probably going to cost you $80. There was a sealed copy on Discogs a while ago for $125. Now we come to a big gap in years because starting around 1990, my vinyl buying went way down. CD era was upon us, bought a lot of CDs, and in fact, from 2000 to 2010, for 10 years, I did not buy any vinyl. I've bought some vinyl that fills in that time since then, but I have nothing with special covers from then. So we're going to take a big leap to 2015. Father John Misty, the former Jay Tillman, drummer for the Fleet Foxes, solo artist. He comes out as Father John Misty. His second album, I Love You, Honey Bear, was given this extraordinary package. It's like a diorama pop-up on the inside. This was released by Sub Pop. He worked with Sacha Baron, who also did the first Fleet Foxes album. But he was the art director. The paintings were by Stacy Rojitz. There were photos by Emma Tillman, other paintings by Alia Penner, who recently worked on his Chloe album. Now, this was not just a package with a cutout inside, with a pop-up inside. It also had tricolor vinyl. Now, the funny story is that the packaging warped vinyl so badly that Sub Pop had to reissue everyone who bought it at first new copies of the vinyl. Believe it or not, all 4 discs play just fine. The original ones, the ones they sent me later. And the thing that's so cool about this, you also get a poster inside that has all the lyrics and artwork. You also get a booklet, exercises for listening, and early pre-order people got this cassette of demos, which is packaged to look like a handwritten cassette like you might get from a friend. Very cool package. There's actually supposed to be a little bit of music that plays when you open it, but that actually never worked on mine. Maybe I should have sent it back for that. Oh yeah, and here's the letter from Sub Pop where they said, we're really sorry these records are so warped. We're going to send you some more. Just absolutely fantastic album too. If you can find it with all the goodies and the cassette and everything, it's probably going to cost you around $150. Now, sometimes these things are a little bit gratuitous, and I fall for them too. I'm only human. So when Radiohead put out a moon-shaped pool in this deluxe package, I fell for it and I bought it. I think it actually cost me about $90 at the time, which was maybe not a great investment. You can get them for $75 or $100 now, but it is just a really cool package. This strip on the outside is actually a piece of magnetic tape from the recording sessions. They chopped them up and put them in there. It's actually kind of puffy. And it says here that it was case bound, inspired by the albums for 78 shellac records, like the ones I showed you earlier, in the library of La Fabrique, France. And it also, so the records are in there like that. And you also get this beautiful artwork. And then you get CDs, including a couple extra songs on here, which was part of the selling point for me, but not a lot of additional music. Would I say this totally enhanced my experience of the album? Maybe not so much, only because I listen to the CDs mostly. And, you know, with the strip on here, it's a little bit of a thing to get it off the shelf and actually play it. So it is what it is. I'm happy I have it. It's got this pull tab on there. I mean, the detailing is just extraordinary. And in 2017, Bob Dylan was doing his own looking back, the Great American Songbook. He released several records in that vein. One of them was Triplicate. This was a triple album, and it was released in this deluxe limited edition designed by Jeff Gans, who worked on a lot of Dylan stuff. I have number 8,374. I'm not sure how limited the whole thing was, but you can see, once again, it's a throwback to those early record albums. It's just so beautifully done. Do I love every song on all three records? I have to say no, but some of them are very, very good. And then it's also got on the back the song titles, and I love the metallic sheen of it. It's very, very nicely done. It's a great way to have this record. This was kind of it for Dylan in that vein, and we moved on from there. You can maybe find one of these for about 25 bucks, but I've seen them for as much as 80 if they're still sealed. Now, no discussion of vinyl packaging would be complete without talking about Greenway Records. Every time they put something out, it's always extraordinary. This is from 2019. This is Levitation Rooms album Headspace. And they really went all out because they've got this super cool 3 die cut on the cover. And when you first look at it, you're not sure which is die cut, which isn't. You can also flop this around to get different designs in the holes. And then it's got the lyric sheet, really cool design. It also came with a small poster, Levitation Room. It came with a pin that I have on my bag. And the vinyl itself was quite beautiful. They always do this hand-poured wax, so everyone is different. It's a great album. I call it elegant psych pop with skywalking guitar sounds. It's just a lot of fun. Now, they only made 250 of these. I've seen it sold for as little as $20, but there's only one available now, and it's cost $100. So there's only 250 of them. Design and artwork by Andrew McGranahan. He did covers for Frankie and the Witchfingers and Triptides. Both have been released on Greenway Records. And he's also a flugelhorn player. So if you're looking for one of those who can also do your album cover, you might want to give McGranahan a call. Finally, we're going to get to 2021, the fantastic Floating Points Pharoah Sanders collaboration with the London Symphony Orchestra, known as Promises. Every time they put out a new pressing of this, it sold out so fast that I couldn't get a copy of it, but I really wanted to have it on vinyl. And then one day it was like late at night and this thing pops up and they just put out a new pressing. I think there's 250 of these, probably cost you $60. But first of all, it has the die cut cover, which is kind of an experience, the way it changes Julie Mehetru's painting, which is called Congress, the way it transforms it with those shapes. And then you get this nice card, which gives you some inside looks at the collaboration, Pharoah Sanders and Floating Points, aka Sam Shepard. On the inside of the cutouts, there's also an image, Pharoah Sanders' hands. And then the record itself is also hand-poured vinyl, so no two are alike. It sounds great. It looks great. It was one of the best albums of 2021. And that brings us to a close. That was 20 cool and unusual vinyl packages for your enjoyment. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to AnEarful on YouTube, Substack, and everywhere else you can subscribe to things. It's been Jeremy Shatton. Go out and buy some new records.